The story of today's PEI Union of Public Sector Employees begins in 1945 as the PEI Public Servants Association. The first meeting was held on February 8th, with H.R. Carruthers acting as the president. In late May of that year, he and three other members, L.W. Shaw, J.W. Curry, and P.A. Murnahan, met and drafted a constitution for the association. On June 4th, the first constitution of the PEI PSA was formally adopted. Annual membership dues were set at 50 cents. 1946 saw the first annual general meeting of the association, with the meeting being held in the Legislative Assembly chamber. At that time, there were 116 members. L.W. Shaw was elected president, and it was agreed upon that the association would hold 4 general meetings a year and a general annual meeting each January. The group focused mainly on providing social activities for the members to promote camaraderie. They arranged for dances, magic shows, corn boils, and wiener roasts, and they also formed a very successful bowling league. People who worked for the provincial government were well respected in their communities, and there was a certain prestige attached to a government position. Later that year, the association decided to present what it felt was a reasonable schedule of proposed salaries to the Executive Council for consideration. And in a show of good faith, the employer adopted the schedule in November of the same year. By the second annual convention in January 1947, the association boasted 200 members. 105 were in attendance at the meeting, where they elected the third president, J.F. Conley. At one of the regular meetings later that year, the annual dues were raised to $1, and a proposal was made to approach government for a cost of living bonus. The association suggested $225 for married employees and $125 for single employees. The government supported the concept, but agreed to pay only $125 for married employees and $75 for single employees. It seems the more things change, the more they stay the same. In the 1950s, the association made important advances. Among these were accumulated sick leave for employees, membership in the Canadian Council of Provincial Employees Association, group insurance, superannuation, and a 5-day work week. A joint committee between the association and the government was struck to study and report on the classification of salaries for all government departments. The invitation of the PSA to participate in this study was considered by the members to be a sign of good relations between the parties and provided the PSA executive with the confidence to speak up for the members on other employment-related issues. In 1953, the association achieved an agreement with government for the establishment of an annual Christmas bonus for government employees. In the request from the executive of the PSA, President Dr. George C. Fisher pointed out, "We cannot emphasize the point too strongly that a satisfied employee is a good employee." As a result of their request, all government employees received an annual Christmas bonus of $10. In May 1961, the Attorney General authorized PSA to incorporate, and a new constitution and bylaws were developed and accepted. That same month also introduced the first issue of the association newsletter, aptly named the Association News. 1962 was an important year for the association. Under the leadership of President McIntyre, a joint council was established to deal with employee grievances. A new Civil Service Act was put in place designed to give a greater measure of job security. At the time, it was considered to be one of the best in the country. The employer also agreed to implement a new pay schedule for all government employees, going with 26 pay periods per year, with every second Thursday being payday. 1965 saw the establishment of a 40-hour work week for healthcare staff, improvements to the retirement insurance coverage, and mandatory membership for all full-time employees in the group insurance plan. Although all of these achievements were welcomed by the association and its members, they were beginning to realize that although the employer was willing to listen to their suggestions and often implement them to a degree, the results were usually far from what they had been hoping for. There was much discussion across the country about collective bargaining, and it was a topic which was becoming discussed quite often among the PSA members. The year also saw Mr. E.J. Prott being hired as Executive Secretary, the first paid staff member of the association. The decade ended with ongoing discussions with government over their plan to reduce the number of job classifications from 360 to 40. A PSA crest designed by M.J. Cudmore was adopted, and it was also agreed to pay an annual honorarium to the president of $250. 1973 and 74 were years of firsts for the PSA. The first official employer-employee consultations, the first collective agreement with the government, and the first ratification vote by members on wages and working conditions. During this time, President Buell established the association's first affiliation with the House of Labour by becoming a member of the Canadian Labour Congress. He was also instrumental in developing the first joint training program with government on employer-employee relations. In 1977, the association office moved to its present location, elected Blair James as president, and boasted a membership of 3,340. The association's second collective agreement included a wage increase in the second year that exceeded the federal government's anti-inflation legislation and saw the association formally challenge the federal government for an exception, which they were successful in obtaining. In 1983, the Jim Lee government announced its intention to roll back signed agreements, resulting in a major protest rally in Charlottetown, which caused them to give up on the idea. They did implement Bill 39, which limited bargaining rights by placing a ceiling on wage increases to 7.5% over the next 2 years. In 1984, the association adopted a new name, the Prince Edward Island Union of Public Sector Employees, and in 1986, UPSE was involved in the creation of the PEI Occupational Health and Safety Act. In 88 lobbying efforts for pay equity, legislation paid off as the government passed the PEI Pay Equity Act. In 1990, Mike Butler became the first full-time president of PEI UPSE. He held this position for a decade, providing leadership and direction during a very tumultuous period. Here are just a few of the highlights. Pay equity agreement with the average adjustment per employee of $3,120, paid out over a 5-year period. Occupational health and safety policy signed. Employee assistance program initiated. Civil Service Bargaining Unit approved the formation of government agencies to help address the provincial deficit, and the introduction of the Health Reform Act, which was strongly opposed by UPSE because of its privatization initiative. In 1993, in light of the province's poor financial position, government employees agreed to a voluntary wage rollback. And then in May of 1994, just after they had signed a collective agreement with its employees, the Callbeck government showed a total lack of respect for unionized labor and the right to collective bargaining by legislating the infamous 7.5% wage rollback. This action precipitated the largest ever public protest in this province. As the 21st century opened, the membership continued to grow with community inclusions, Straight Crossing Bridge Limited, and the Garden Home 1986, Inc., joining the UPSE family. There was also a huge commitment made by UPSE members to work towards a goal of organizing ECEs out of the province. In 2005-06, the Binns government announced a hiring freeze. All public sector unions filed grievances, which forced the government to reverse its decision. Government then introduced Program Renewal, aka Bill 44, which created much turmoil among the membership, as many members were forced to take a different position after theirs was abolished. The legislation also resulted in an arbitrated decision by Judge Adams regarding union jurisdiction. UPSE was assisted during these proceedings by brother Art Lane from OPSEU. 2006 saw another first for UPSE, the election of its first female president, Shelley Ward. Under her direction, a new emphasis was placed on educating members, especially the stewards in their roles. UPSE grew their membership by adding Whisperwood Villa and the first negotiated contract for an early childhood center in PEI, with Charlottetown's Child Development Center. Since then, 3 other centers have reached this milestone. Under President Ward, the union forged ahead in 2010 with plans to renovate and expand the UPSE office, which was approved at the 48th Annual Convention. This significant project was necessary, as the office had served the membership for decades with minimal upkeep and/or repair. And aside from the general condition of the office, the growing staff and membership were limited by a lack of office space to conduct meetings and carry out day-to-day business. The renovations were completed in 2011, effectively allowing the union to move into the future with increased meeting and office space for a growing membership. The office renovation and upgrade allowed the membership to make a key investment in the long-term sustainability of the union. Beginning in 2010 and continuing into 2011, the union delivered the All Together Now campaign as part of a long-term national effort to raise awareness about the critical need for public services and tax fairness in Canada. In early 2011, the government approached all public sector unions to enter into discussions regarding the long-term feasibility of the defined benefit pension plan. Debbie Boyer was soon after elected president in 2012. It became clear that the government's idea of consultation regarding changes to the pension plan was a foregone conclusion. They proposed fundamental adjustments to the pension, moving from a plan that used the best 3 years active income to a career average pension plan with indexing contingent on the health of the fund. In November 2012, UPSE organized a march involving many public sector unions who would protest the changes. Ultimately, the GIZ government proceeded with the changes without support of UPSE, replacing the Civil Service Superannuation Fund with the PEI Public Sector Pension Plan. The challenges in the workplace continued as well, as members routinely were reporting incidences of harassment and bullying. In response, UPSE adopted NSGEU's model to establish a series of workshops for bully-free workplaces. This was done in cooperation with the Public Service Commission to deliver education and awareness throughout the civil service. Karen Jackson was elected president in 2015 and subsequently re-elected in 2018 and 2021. In 2016, the GIZ government announced the private sale of Mill River Golf Course and Provincial Park to a private developer. This left impacted unionized employees without union representation, as PEI was the only province which did not have successor rights under the Labour Act. UPSE filed a grievance for failure to consult and was successful in advocating for those interested casual members to be placed at other government-run locations. UPSE's organizing efforts were increased in the last decade as the union welcomed Garden Home, Community Connections, Lady Slipper Villa, City of Charlottetown, and the faculty at Atlantic Tourism Hospitality Institute. The membership grew with both public and private sector representation. In 2017, UPSE celebrated paying off their building mortgage early without having to increase membership dues. The last time dues increased was in 2010. In its ongoing fight against privatization, UPSE launched a Keep Home Care Public campaign in 2018 in response to government's move to privatize some aspects of home care in PEI. The union also continued to lobby against the sale of alcohol in private agency stores with the Keep Liquor Sales Public campaign. Another important debate took shape regarding the legalized sale of cannabis in 2018. Should sales be private or public? UPSE argued that the public model is more effective when dispensing a government-controlled substance and enforcing minimum age restrictions. Through key talks with government, it was determined that the public model should be used for the sale and distribution of cannabis in PEI. In 2019, UPSE was instrumental in getting paid leave for victims of domestic violence into the Employment Standards Act for all islanders, as well as the Eric Donovan Act, which legislated the protection of all island workers against bullying and harassment under the Occupational Health and Safety legislation. UPSE also successfully lobbied government to introduce first contract legislation in Prince Edward Island to promote fairness and better relationships between workers and employers when they first enter into collective bargaining. In early 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic unilaterally changed everyone's life, at home and at work. UPSE members were instrumental in ensuring safety standards, supports, and protections of islanders were in place. Under President Jackson, UPSE became a leader in setting safety standards across the country on the safe reopening of public liquor stores, as many other provinces implemented PEI's guidelines. UPSE's quick response alleviated talk about privatizing liquor sales in PEI. In 2022, with the pandemic still in full swing, UPSE launched a campaign on behalf of members in long-term care. A series of TV ads pulled back the curtain on the challenging working conditions in this sector, using the testimony of members, which helped prompt government to enhance their retention and recruitment efforts. UPSE also continued to lobby for wage parity between the private and public sector in long-term care settings. As islanders worked to help one another through the pandemic, they were confronted with another major event. Hurricane Fiona, the largest storm in Canadian history, hit the island and caused widespread damage. By the time Fiona reached the shores of PEI, it was considered a tropical storm. However, its sheer size and power had devastating effects on the power grid and infrastructure across the island. UPSE members in transportation and infrastructure rallied to provide post-Fiona restoration and cleanup efforts across PEI. And the membership as a whole worked to provide vital services to islanders in the wake of the disaster. UPSE has shown over the years that the union is a positive force for social change. Members work together to improve contracts and advocate on behalf of workers who need support in the workplace. UPSE cares about social justice and supports communities across Prince Edward Island. And the union collaborates with key stakeholders in the province to strengthen labor and build a stronger economy for all workers. The Prince Edward Island Union of Public Sector Employees has achieved a great deal over the past 60 years and has good reason to celebrate the past, present, and future.